If you've ever experienced a time where the way somebody treated you made you have to ask yourself a question like, how can they treat me like that? Am I not a person too? That sense of dehumanization, that sense of disbelief that somebody could treat you that way as just another person makes it clear that you are not being treated as a person, but instead you are being treated as what I call the other. Now, to understand the other, we have to go back a little bit. Now, when you perceive the world, you naturally break things down into two categories. You perceive persons and you perceive things. This is exactly why when you see a person, you refer to them as somebody, someone, as opposed to something when you see anything else. So things include inanimate objects, of course, and animals and whatnot. And then persons are obviously people. So there's this initial distinction between things and persons, but there's another thing that happens too, which is you recognize that people are also objects in the sense that within your perceptible realm, they are physically present, right? You could bump into a person the same way you can bump into anything else. And so in that sense, your brain sees them in two ways, as both objects and simultaneously as a person. Now, if you saw them as only objects, right, that kind of tells you that your attitude towards them could be more aligned with the way that you treat any other object in your surroundings. But the fact that you recognize them as a person requires that we investigate a little further and understand how should we treat that person? What's the proper way to treat them? And to understand that, it's best to understand what makes a person a person. That we can go really deep into, but let's do it really simply. Now, you can look in your own life and you recognize something about yourself, which is that you have a whole inner world. You've got this inner life going on, this subjective experience. It's a unique thing. Call it consciousness, call it the soul, whatever you want to call it, but it's there and it's distinctly human. And what's more is it's not measurable, it's not quantifiable. The only way to really help anybody see and understand your inner world is through expression, whether that's language, whether that's art or something else. You have to express it in some way. And even then, as I've talked about in previous videos, your subjectivity kind of keeps you trapped. And so that too, the limit of your ability to express that inner world is also uniquely human and distinctly human. And so when you recognize this and you now see other people in your perceptible realm, you recognize them first as a physical object, but then you simultaneously have to recognize that they too are a person like you. And so at the very least, what you know about them is this: they have an internal world just like you. It's infinitely complex, just like yours is, and they're somewhat limited in their ability to express that inner world to anybody else. And I think as soon as you process that, as soon as you realize that, there's this innate sense of compassion that you might feel for the other person, knowing that they're just like you, right? And just as you've experienced, again, hurt and joy and passion and sorrow, so have they. So there's a middle stage, however, between this, right? Which is where you recognize that a person isn't a thing, but you don't recognize them in their complete personhood. And that is what I call the other. When you recognize somebody as the other, you are recognizing them more so as an object and less so as a person. So you dehumanize them, you deperson them, if you will. And what that means is you don't look past their physical being. You don't look past to recognize that internal world that they have, and you just limit it to their physical being. And this is not good. This is a problem. And the reason being is when you look at somebody as an other instead of as another person, your attitude towards them more so aligns with your attitude towards objects than it does towards other people. When you treat them poorly, you don't feel as bad because in your mind, you don't look at them as a person, and that lets you get away with treating them poorly without it really taking a toll on your conscience. And it has to be said that not only do we do this as humans, but that this is natural as humans. There's not a single one of us that doesn't do this to some extent or another. In fact, we especially do it when we're part of an in-group and we have an out-group. And we see this all the time, certainly in politics. You can look at this right now. It doesn't matter where in politics you fall, but you can see this idea that there's your in-group and you guys are the good guys, and there's the out-group and they're the bad guys. And not only are they the bad guys, but they're subhuman. You dehumanize them. And this happens all the time in groups, because what that allows is for you to look at those people as less than people, as just others, and do all kinds of things to them. It's the same spirit that allows atrocities to occur. If you've ever asked yourself how it's possible that so many of the Germans stood by while Hitler rose to power as he was doing and saying all the things he was, you can trace it back to, well, Hitler looked at, in particular, the Jews and also gypsies and other people as others. He looked at them as subhuman, not persons. He put people on a scale based on an arbitrary metric, and everyone who didn't make the cutoff was just subhuman to him. And that allowed him to justify treating those people as less than persons. And so you can see that if you adopt that mentality, if you adopt the mentality of the other for a particular group, it might start off small and, like I said, maybe even in a healthy competitive way, but it can easily be perverted into something so much worse. And again, it sounds crazy. You say like, that's not, like, I would never do that. But yet we've seen this time and time again throughout history where people have dehumanized, they've looked at people as others, and then conflict has broken out, and the only result has been death. So it's really critical to take this seriously and to not think of it as some kind of esoteric idea, or, you know, like, oh, it's just like a philosophical concept. Like, no, it has very practical consequences, very real consequences that impact you and me and can impact our loved ones. So with that understanding, just be aware of the times that you look at people as others instead of as complete persons. Recognize that you have more in common with all of the people around you than you do differences, including just that bare minimum fact that you're both people, that you both have these internal worlds, and that yes, there are bad people in the world, but most people are really just trying to get by with what they've got, figure it out. I genuinely believe that. And I think if you take this attitude of trying to see the personhood in everybody around you, the only attitude you can take towards them is one of love and respect, really. Hopefully now you understand what the other is and understand that this is a real conversation that needs to be had, and it has real consequences. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.